Hey everyone, this is Derek Bros with the Conscious Resistance Network and Freethinker Radio, and today I'm bringing you a returning guest, an old friend of mine who I haven't spoke to, I'm going to say maybe 2 years now. You, I'm sure, are familiar with his work. Ben Swann, investigative journalist, reporter, researcher, and a source of controversy of late, as we're talking about COVID-19 and many other things. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm doing great. How are you, Derek?
I'm doing good, man. It's been a while, but let's just dive right into it. I mean, I've kept up with your work, and I know you've seen some of my work over the last couple of years that we spoke. And the major thing. Let's maybe start off on a good foot. With the things that you've been producing that have led to Ise.media. Last time we spoke about this, it was just beginning. You were kind of in the early stages of getting investors and things of that sort. Let's start there before we get into some of the hairy news and tell everybody about this exciting announcement that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been talking about this for some time, as you know. You and I have actually talked about it multiple times. But I think what's really unique is coming into 2020 and watching everything that was taking place in terms of content creators really being forced off of these platforms or completely silenced on one end, and on the other end, just having all of their content labeled as manipulative, dangerous, misleading, or fake. We were like, well, we can't wait any longer to do this. We just got to do it now. That's why we actually have launched it using an equity crowdfunding strategy. So we're trying to raise money really from the crowd. And what makes this different than like a Kickstarter, for instance, is you're not just giving money to the project to see it happen. You're actually becoming an investor, owning equity in the company. So that's what we're doing right now. But the goal is to say we got to create a platform that's a free speech platform to get content creators on there because, I've been warning about this for years, as you know, that this was happening and was going to only get worse. But even I did not anticipate the acceleration that we were going to see in 2020. And it's unbelievable. The combination of really folks being removed from platforms along with this fake fact checking thing that's been set up through Facebook and through YouTube and Google. And what's really interesting about this, I'll go off on a little tangent here if I can, but what's interesting about this concept of these fact checkers is, number one, they don't check facts. It's really unbelievable. As a journalist, right? If you're going to be fact checking means you look at the content of the claims that are made, the content of the reporting, and you verify whether or not that reporting is accurate, whether or not the studies that are cited are accurate, whether or not the numbers that are used are accurate. You don't go in there and say, well, we're looking for any phraseology or wording that might be misleading. And by the way, they're not even doing that to mine. What they're doing with mine is then suddenly, amazingly, after my report goes out, someone will happen to post on Facebook. And you know how people will post the video and they put like a little frame around it and they put text in that frame. Well, somebody I don't know, will take that and they'll put some crazy comment. Like, for instance, a report I did on the Wuhan lab and the fact that multiple scientists were saying that this coronavirus appears to have been really man-made. It appears that it was not natural, did not occur in nature, and has been manipulated, right? And these are multiple virologists around the world who have said this. And what they did was they took that and someone put a frame around it and put the scientists confirm that the coronavirus is a U.S. bioweapon, right? That's never said in the report. That claim or phrase is never cited. However, the report itself is now flagged as misleading or false because they didn't fact check the report. Instead, they fact check what someone else writes as a caption, and then they say, well, therefore this thing is untrue. And so it's ways of getting around actual responsible journalism because they're not journalists and they're not being responsible. They're there to push a narrative and to remove anyone who dissents from that narrative.
Absolutely. So I definitely want to comment on fact checking with you in just a moment, but let's just share a little more with Ise. I know that you've put out some of your content on there that people can find, and so you're raising funds right now. And you were just telling me a moment ago that the direction you're headed in is to welcome other content creators and eventually. Could you talk a little bit about that and what you plan to do with that?
So the goal is not for me to create another platform for myself. The goal is to really create a platform for content creators and really people across the political spectrum, right? We're not looking to create an echo chamber. We're looking to create a place for debate and discussion and for people to disagree. I think that's a healthy thing in society. And a free speech platform really for any content creator who wants to reach an audience in an unfiltered way. I will tell you, and I can't spoil it yet because I don't want to step in front of myself, but within the next 2 weeks, we're going to have at least 2 major projects, it looks like, that are coming to ICE that have been banned in other places. And so they're coming to our platform. And we're really excited about that, because the goal is to, again, it's not about me, and it's not about, promoting only my content. It's about saying we need a place where content creators can go and be safe to actually have a platform. The Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act that all these tech companies have used to build their empires is based upon the idea of a platform being just that, being a platform, not a publisher. We're trying to create a true platform where it doesn't matter if I dislike what you're saying. It doesn't matter if I disagree with what you're saying. It doesn't even matter, honestly, if you're being untruthful in what you're saying. Free speech gives you the right to speak. And then within that community of people who are viewing and watching and a part of that ecosystem, they have the right to challenge those ideas and to speak freely as well. So that's what we need. We need to return to this concept of freedom, and that's what we're attempting to do. So right now, if you go to Ise.media, you're going to see just basically my content. Like I said, within the next 2 weeks, you're going to see other content as well. And then we're currently, as we speak, we're building that channel system so that as soon as that's done, we can begin to onboard content creators to have their own channels.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that idea. But it also, Ben, and I will tell you, it sounds a little crazy. You think that people have the intelligence to decipher information for themselves and pick apart fact from fiction? I mean, how dare you?
Right.
But
arrogant. It's arrogant.
One last thing on ICE before we move forward. So, and this is more, I guess, your personal opinion. I've noticed that this is a strategy that more and more people are picking up because, I mean, many of us have seen this since 2015, when even before the purges started to happen, when it was just shadow banning. But now it's outright deletion of people. It's, taking people off GoFundMe, taking people off Amazon, all this stuff that we've seen coming. And I've seen in response to this, I think David Icke has like his iconic platform. I've seen a few others who are kind of going the strategy you are, whereas rather than just joining, say, Minds or BitChute or some other alternative social media platform, they're interested in creating their own, which I do think is also an effective strategy. But I have seen from some of the listeners, the audience members, something along the lines of, I don't know where to go to find everybody. You're all going different places. So what are your thoughts on that as far as, are we going to make it somewhat harder for people to find us by filtering to our own platforms, or do you think in the long term it'll be better?
Well, I think typically, if you look at technology, long term, 1 or 2 platforms emerges, right? And I'm not saying that would even necessarily be ours, except for the fact that what we're trying to do is create, as I said, a channel system that, number one, is fair in terms of allowing anyone. So you can have your own website and you can have all your other channels, and then you can just add a channel to ours as well. I don't see why people wouldn't do that, because it doesn't cost you anything to do it. It's another place to be where you can speak freely. The other thing is we're going to allow monetization of channels where anybody who is a content creator can monetize their own channel. We're not trying to control that or pick that apart. And then lastly, one thing that will make us, I think, fairly unique, I'm not sure anybody else is doing this, is we plan to emulate the Dash and the Smart Cash platform and strategy they had with cryptocurrencies to promote their cryptos, in that we want to create a treasury system within our ecosystem that allows a decentralized process by which content creators can not only go to create content, but can apply for funding for that content. And then the community, not me and not anyone who's in charge and has veto power, where the community gets to vet those projects and the community decides how funds are spent for content and who gets it and who doesn't. And I think there's something valuable about that, because it's one thing to say, well, I have an established channel, I have followers, and so I can find advertisers. But if you're just starting out, as you know, it's really hard for people to find advertising or find funding for projects. And yet it doesn't mean that you're not capable, and it doesn't mean you don't have a great vision and an idea. And so if we can be a part of that, I think that's one thing that will make our platform unique. But I encourage all the platforms to exist, because I think the more competition there is, the better it makes all of us.
Absolutely. More speech is the answer, not less speech.
That's right.
I love the using the treasury idea from Smart Cash and Dash towards the content creation. That's great. So we got into fact checking there for a moment, and I just want to add a couple thoughts, and we can kind of move it towards COVID. I mean, I've seen, so for those who don't know, I used to write for Ben's website a couple years back, and written for a number of independent media websites. And around the time, Ben, that you started to transition to focusing on ICE, and a lot of the team was, moving into other projects, within that same week, I lost every single writing job I have in the alternative media within 1 week due to Google AdSense funny business of taking down monetization and all that within a week. Ise.media, a number of websites that, as you know, a couple years ago were reaching hundreds of thousands of people a day were just gone. And so the ecosystem has greatly shrunk. While there's still tons of content out there, I would say as far as those who are trying to put out hard-hitting, investigative, factual content that people can really count on, that pool has shrank greatly, unfortunately. And so there's a lot of stories that we just simply don't have the bandwidth to keep up with. And part of that problem has been the fact checking. The last website I was writing for was consistently getting fact checked by Facebook fact checkers for the same kind of stuff you're talking about. Semantic arguments. They try to go and find, well, maybe this is true, but then technically, it doesn't explicitly say this. They try to find some way that they can just put that false rating on top and discourage anybody from being able to look into that. And as you know, when you start to look into these fact checkers, many of them come from CNN, come from other mainstream outlets, news leader, story leader. There's Africa Check, Science Feedback, a lot of these really generic names that have popped up that are partnered with Facebook and others. I think this is probably one of the biggest dangers to not only independent media, but to free thought in general. So, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. One of the things that we have to recognize is that these fact checkers are not fact checkers. They're not. They are paid political pundits in some cases. Many of them have worked for political campaigns in the past. As you mentioned, they work for CNN. But who's giving them the money to do this? You also have to look at that. Where is the funding for these organizations coming from? There's one called Lead Stories. Who's funding Lead Stories, right? And as you said, if you go to the websites, they're horrific-looking websites. There's no money being put into that because that's not what their value is. They are receiving money from groups like the Atlantic Council and Soros, who are backing these groups in order to do nothing but essentially go around looking for stories online that are picking up traction that go against their narrative, and then slurring and slandering. My sister had actually, after one of those fact check pieces about me came out, she started texting me and said, "Have you read this one?" And I said, "I hadn't read it yet because I just know it's all garbage." And she says, "You really should look at this one because they don't ever address your article. The whole thing's about you. It's just basically slandering you." And that's what they're doing, right? Their strategy is to say, we're going to attack you, attack the messenger, and we're going to, as you said, these semantic arguments are used to try to claim everything is false. But at the same time, I think that this process is backfiring for the fact checkers because I have heard from so many people in the last few weeks who did not think there was a problem before, who suddenly shared something online and they got a message from Facebook, you're sharing misinformation or disinformation, you're sharing something that's possibly harmful to the community. And they're like, it was a meme, right? It wasn't anything. An example of something that was recently taken down and flagged that I had put up, and this was not my own work, it was a picture of a flyer from an Ace Hardware in Michigan when the governor there, Gretchen Whitmer, had put out the mandate saying if businesses allow customers to come in who are not wearing face masks, the business will lose their license. There's an Ace Hardware that put up a flyer, and essentially all they said in it was, the governor has said that you must wear a face mask unless you have a medical condition. If you walk in here without a mask on, we assume it means a medical condition. We will respect your First Amendment and Fourth Amendment rights as well as HIPAA laws, and we won't ask you. That's all it said. Can you fact check that flyer? No. You can't fact check the flyer. If you fact check the flyer, an actual fact check would mean this flyer was not actually in an Ace Hardware. It's fake. It was made by somebody who just put it on the internet. That's a fact check. Instead, because it's a real flyer that was used in a real store and it was getting traction, instead, the fact checkers flagged it as being false. And then when you say, check why, it says HIPAA laws do not prevent you from asking this. And it's like, but that's not the point. The point isn't whether or not they can legally ask you. The point was they're not going to ask you because they disagree with what the governor's done, and this is how they were getting around it. And so when you are constantly, see, that's what I'm trying to say. It's more than just a control of speech. It's more than just a control of whether or not things are true and untrue. It's trying to control the entire thought process. We will control how you think, and we will control what you think and what you're allowed to even come in contact with. And that's what's so dangerous about it.
Absolutely. And, it's also this month that Google has said that they're going to stop serving Google ads to websites that are promoting quote unquote coronavirus, coronavirus conspiracy theories. I also, just before we did this interview, saw that YouTube has now changed their terms of service to say that any videos that report on, quote unquote hacked documents, and they specifically say WikiLeaks or documents that are meant to influence the election, will be taken down, and the channels could potentially be taken down. I mean, so you mentioned the Atlantic Council. That to me was way back in May 2000, I think 17, or maybe 16, when Facebook first partnered with the Atlantic Council. Yes, it was right before the election. That was a huge red flag to me and yourself and others, that this is tied to NATO. This is basically the Western military industrial complex, and they partner directly with Facebook, and that's when all the purges began. That's when the fact checkers came. That's when all this stuff. Now we're here at the point where, if you talk about conspiracy theories related to coronavirus, which I'm sure everything that we've discussed, from credentialed doctors, from people talking about potential for being bioweapons, would be labeled a conspiracy theory. And as we know, many people in the independent media and just businesses in general rely on companies like Google Ads to serve, ads on their website and make a profit, and to survive, basically, sometimes barely making a profit. And that's another attack there. And now YouTube, they're already threatening so they might be anticipating some leaked videos to come out. And if we report on them, we're at the mercy of whether or not they want to delete our channels. I mean, I know clearly you believe the solution, as I do, is to create better platforms and put those in the marketplace. But outside of that, Ben, I mean, the consumers are seeing this happening, and I feel like people are just kind of maybe in a panic mode. Like, I don't want to lose touch with you, Ben. I don't want to lose touch with you guys. We're not going to stop creating content, but they are making it extremely difficult for the average person, which I think is the person you and I aim to reach. I don't want to preach to the choir. I know you don't want to preach to the choir. We appreciate people that agree with the things we report, but the goal is always to reach more people. And that is what I'm most concerned about, is that this is going to limit our ability to reach those new minds that we're always after. What do you think about that?
Well, I think you're right. I think it will certainly limit it in the short term, but not in the long term. So if you play the longer game, then you recognize that, yes, in the short term, all of our reach is going to be significantly cut. The ability to connect with audiences and to actually speak to those audiences may be limited for a time. But what will happen is more and more people will begin to migrate away from those platforms when they recognize that those platforms are denying them the ability to know what's going on. Now, this is something that I don't think, so typically I would say this: I think that tech companies, and other companies as well, by the way, tend to overreach at times, right? Where you feel like you've got all the power, you've got all the influence, and so you can do whatever you want. And then there comes the moment when you've overreached, and what you do is you set people on a different path who have been sleeping for years and who have not been aware of anything, or haven't chosen to be aware, who haven't cared. Now all of a sudden those people say, wait a minute, because it's beginning to impact my life. So when, for instance, you're being told, we're going to censor anyone who traffics in COVID conspiracy theories. So what are those conspiracy theories? Are those conspiracy theories that not everyone should take the vaccine that's being rushed at record pace into production? Or the fact that other countries like Sweden, for instance, haven't instituted lockdowns and are doing better than the rest of the world? Are those conspiracy theories? Well, they would say yes. But the problem is that when all of a sudden you've been asleep and you're being told that your child's going to be vaccinated, you have to be vaccinated, you're going to have to carry some kind of immunity passport, to access airplanes or to travel. There's an editorial in USA Today that blew my mind the other day. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, that essentially said that people should face higher tax penalties. They should be denied health insurance. They should not be allowed to work. They should be banned from having jobs if they don't get the vaccine. I mean, it was literally written in a way, it might as well have just said, take people out and shoot them if they won't take the vaccine. I mean, because you're essentially doing the same thing. You're trying to literally kill people economically, socially, emotionally, spiritually. You're trying to destroy them if they refuse to take your vaccine. And so when these tech companies now line up and are part of this process, I think that what they're going to actually do is arouse the curiosity of millions of people who have chosen to not be curious for years, and now suddenly will say, because it's affecting me and my life, now I'm going to pay attention.
Yeah, and I think overall you are right that I've seen in my experience that just the last 6, 7, 8 months that people who, like you said, maybe never really felt that concerned about what was going on in the world, that certain things have happened. They're like, okay, maybe that's a little too far. I'm going to start paying more attention. So I do think you're correct that in the long term, this type of action, it tends to backfire. Maybe in the immediate term, people can't find us or they're limited information, but it does create a curiosity in people's minds. And also to the USA Today piece, I saw it as well. I mean, I honestly think, Ben, like that's been one of the things that's stuck in my head the last week or so, because I feel like the fact that that could be published by two doctors and an attorney on a mainstream outlet, like, yes, it's an opinion piece, but it's USA Today, it's major mainstream, that probably was published in their newspaper edition of that day as well. And going in front of all kinds of eyes and ears in front of Americans, like, just the fact that that can be published in mainstream without raising an eyebrow, to me is just, it shows that we are in uncertain times. And this creep, of course, has been going on since 9/11 and even prior to that. But we're seeing sort of this rapid pace of government overreach just at a level that is just, frankly, it's disturbing. And I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I know that you do a great job, and it's something that honestly I can say I was inspired by you over the years to separate your speculation from your reporting. But, clearly here you're among friends, and your thoughts on where this is going, anything that you feel like outside of reporting on what's happening, are you taking any extra, I guess, precautions for yourself or your family that, you like, maybe we won't be able to slow this thing down. Maybe the tide has turned. I mean, just to share briefly, I posted a picture of me and my partner smiling without a mask on the other day. And for the last 4 days, I've been receiving death threats. I've been receiving, I hope you die. I hope you get it. Like, just from people. Somebody shared it in a group in Houston and it blew up, and I've been getting angry emails. We're at this very kind of divisive point where, even asking questions about the masks, let alone the vaccine, is like you said, they want to cast you out of society. So I mean, how do you feel personally as an individual going forward in this world?
Yeah, I think it's pretty incredible, the way that people respond to this issue of masks. You mentioned the picture. And some of it, it doesn't make any kind of logical sense, right? So if the mask issue and the vaccine issue are very similar in that if I choose to not wear a mask, the person that I'm most at risk of contaminating, if you believe in masks, is going to be yourself. And people will say, well, no, because if you carry coronavirus, but I don't have coronavirus, right? And so they'll claim, oh, you can contaminate other people. Now, if you look at the science, I've done a number of stories on this, that science absolutely proves face masks do not work in preventing virus. They just don't do it. And yet, when we talk about the same thing with the vaccine, right? This concept of a vaccine, if you get the vaccine and everyone must have it, but why? Because me not getting a vaccine does not endanger you who have the vaccine if the vaccine works. If the vaccine does what you say that it's going to do, you can take that vaccine. I don't take it. The only person I'm putting at risk is myself, if you believe all of this, right? But the idea that everyone is putting everyone else at risk by not doing this is insane. We know it's insane. And by the way, I've had similar kinds of death threats. I mean, people talking about how you deserve to be raped, right? I hope that you're raped because you won't wear a mask. What are you talking about? Like, where is this?
Those are the compassionate, caring people too.
Right. The people who care about everyone else so much that you need to wear a mask, right? But they want these things. And by the way, I rarely believe that those are even real. I don't believe those are necessarily real people. I think so much of that are disinformation agents that are actually there by design to stir the pot and to create this kind of vitriol. And I typically will go and look at the profile of the person who's saying these things. Rarely will they ever have a profile picture on social media. Rarely have they ever posted anything. It's very limited. And so it looks like a lot of these are just fake accounts that do this. But then you have to ask another question. Why? Why are those disinformation agents out there trying to stir the pot to this level of insanity, a level of no cool heads will prevail, no thinking rational people are allowed in this space? And that's what I think is so dangerous about it. So, in terms of watching where we're headed, look, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to reach a point where we're going to break out of where we are. And I think that we are headed in that trajectory. And I look at national politics and I have very little hope. When I see what's happening today, I think, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris came out and called for a national face mask mandate, right, where everyone's required to wear one. I think if Trump were smart, he would take off his face mask, he'd step on it, and he'd say, I'm not going to wear this stupid thing. He had already done that prior to, and then polling showed it wasn't going well, so he stopped. I think that he would do better if he'd take it off and say, I'm going to be the antithesis to what they're doing. And he's not doing that. He's actually trying to play along and say, everyone love me, everyone like me, instead of taking a stand against it. So I think it's going to be very difficult to shift any of that. And I think the problem is that those who are in authority, whether it's on the local level, on the state level, or the national level, are kind of all feeding from the same trough. So how do you push back against that, and how do you break away from it? I don't know that I have an answer to it, other than to educate people as best as I can. Educate them to say the things you're being told do not line up with science, and they don't line up with common sense.
Yeah, and it's just been such a difficult time, I'd say, because, you know, for every great, well-researched report you put out, the other side pulls out, well, here's our experts. You know, I really have felt in the last year or so that we are witnessing a fracturing of society in a number of ways, at least in America, I'll speak to, because, again, they've got their experts that they fully believe in, and here's the studies we've gotten, and we can put, well, how about these studies and these experts? Well, no, your experts don't count, only our expert, you know.
Yes.
And we're starting to live in basically different realities. But the problem is the folks on the other end of this kind of struggle believe in collective good and forcing their way. You know, they don't believe in individual liberties, individual rights. I mean, I've been, like I said, getting sort of attacked for even believing this idea that I should have freedom over my own body, and how dare you. And so it's definitely that kind of that mindset battling that we're seeing take place. I know we're starting to wrap up here, Ben, with you. One other thing I wanted to get into, you know, when, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes the fact checks on you aren't even about your actual work. They're, you know, they're like, no, let's just look at this guy. He works for RT. And I saw you talking about that one where RT just carries your reality checks. They don't produce them or pay for them or anything like that.
Don't pay for them.
Because of that, oh, this is a Russian spy. I mean, they didn't even do their basic homework, right? But as you know, every time they look into your background, they always bring up, well, he was fired from CBS or this and that, and they always inevitably bring up your report on Pizzagate. And, you know, we talked about that years ago. I mean, for one, do you have any regrets for kind of asking those questions and everything that's, you know, come through since then? And, you know, now, of course, like what you talked about, even just asking the most basic questions of Pizzagate, what we've had Epstein come out, Maxwell, Nexium, like these things are a reality now. Yet you are still labeled, you know, Russian, whatever, conspiracy theorist. You know, what do you think about that situation now?
Yeah, I would say if I had to do it over again, to be honest, with the whole Pizzagate story, wouldn't change a thing, not one thing. I still stand by that report. I think it was fact-based. It did not even go into as much detail as I could have gone. There was a lot more, as you know, to dig into there. And I think that time will absolutely vindicate that report. But candidly, Derek, I don't need it to be vindicated. I know that the reporting was done right. I know that it was accurate. And I know that when we look at everything that's come since then, as you pointed out, with Epstein, which I was also criticized, by the way, for having even questioned that in 2014. Long before the Miami Herald, everyone says, oh, the Miami Herald was the ones who picked it. Nope, I was reporting on that in 2014 about the sentence that he had, and the light sentence, and the fact that there were, you know, a lot of charges since then. I talked about the people on his plane, like Bill Clinton, who had flown on that plane 26 times, the Lolita Express, and had ditched Secret Service in order to get to the island. Things that right now media is claiming, oh, that's not true. He was never even there, right? And so what we're watching is kind of an unraveling of a lot of this. And I would remind folks that if you go back into the Pizzagate story, it did not begin the way that some of these others, like the Wayfair thing, which I'm very skeptical of the Wayfair story. And the reason for that is because of how it came to light. It's a very strange way that came to light. It was suddenly just popped up and someone, hey, this is a weird thing, what if? And then everyone jumped on it. That's not what happened with the Pizzagate story. The Pizzagate story came about because of WikiLeaks leaking text messages and emails. And so it's important to also note that with some of these stories that have broken in terms of that space, it goes back to entities like WikiLeaks that do those document dumps, the same ones that now, as you pointed out a few minutes ago, YouTube says, we'll delete your channel if you report on them, which means they probably are anticipating that something is coming. They know that it's coming and that WikiLeaks has something that they're probably going to drop before the election. But even that, right? Why is it, I don't mean to get on a tangent here, but why is it that Google and YouTube wouldn't be charged with election interference? I mean, how can you say, as an entity, if you talk about something that could be potentially damaging to a candidate on our space, on our so-called platform, that might be damaging to a candidate, if you do that, then candidly, we're going to remove you, right? That's crazy. How can you possibly act like that is not election interference? It absolutely is and would be considered election interference by every measure, and yet it's not. So I think that what we're watching right now is just an incredible kind of playing out. I am excited to say that there are more people now than there were in 2017 who are concerned about child sex trafficking, who are concerned about powerful people having access to children, who are concerned about the normalization of pedophilia in this country, which is happening every day. Media is pushing it every day. And there's more people who are awake to that now. So I'll continue to stand by it. And in the future, I think that it will, as I said, history will prove vindication for that. But I'm not looking for vindication. I know I did what I was supposed to do, and I'll leave it at that.
Absolutely. And as you said, Ben, I mean, there were so many other questions and things you could have gone into. You kept it very surface level, which I think was good for the time and the platform you had. And even that got you attacked. And, it's as you said, more people are waking up to that issue. I hope people will continue to question that. Do you have anything else you want to add as far as Pizzagate? I know it's been a number of years. Anything else you can shed light onto that? I mean, we all know from the outside you were clearly censored, and for those who don't remember, Ben had to take a vacation for a year at the orders of someone on high up. But is there anything else you want to share into that could shed light so people can maybe understand how high up this does go?
So what I would say is with that particular story, yes, all of my social media was taken down for a year. I could not post to social media for a full year, and it wasn't because they said a full year. It was because within that year I was able to walk away. Thanks again, by the way, to Dash as a cryptocurrency for giving me the freedom to do that. But yeah, it would have been indefinite, forever and ever, as far as they were concerned. I will tell you this, that the story itself, I'll continue to say this until the day I die, was vetted by other journalists and the highest journalists in my newsroom at the time, who read through it in advance, who understood what it was in advance, and who signed off on it in advance and said, this is a legitimate, good story. Let's go with it. We ran it. And then it wasn't any of those journalists who changed their mind after the fact. It was calls from management and corporate who said it needs to be taken down, and that they were getting calls from on high. And I will tell you that it had nothing to do with journalists. Journalists were not the ones who said, oh, this story never should have made air in the first place. It did not come from any of those folks. And lastly, I would remind people of this too, because a lot of these websites will pretend that I was fired over Pizzagate. I was actually not fired over Pizzagate. I was fired for fulfilling the terms of my contract. I had a contract that allowed me to do Reality Check and Truth in Media as part of my contract. That's why I went to CBS in the first place. And they reneged on that and refused to allow me to do it. So when I went to enforce the terms of my contract, because I wasn't going to leave with Dash, I had the ability now to create content independently with Dash, but that was contractually part of my agreement. That's when they said, we're getting rid of you. So just holding them to the agreement that they had already made.
You were just doing the work that you'd set out to do, and they, as you know, they spun that as, oh, well, now he's fired for covering that conspiracy theory.
Yes, right. A year later. Right.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for your time, brother. It's always good to catch up with you and to hear how you're doing. I do keep my eyes on your channel and spread your work where I can. I look forward to joining Ise.media once it opens up. Everybody, of course, visit Ben at truthandmedia.com and Ise.media if you want to find out, sign up, and especially if you think you can contribute to help Ben build this platform so we can get more truly decentralized social media out there. Anything else you want to leave us with, Ben?
No, that's it, Derek. Always good to see you. I can't wait to have you on the platform as well.
Awesome. Thank you.